Our speakers today are Mike Miller from Integrigy and Megan Kelly from CardConnect. Mike is the Vice President of Integrigy and manages the security assessment services. Mike has spent over 16 years focused exclusively on the Oracle E-Business Suite and has sat on Oracle's customer advisory boards for security and on Oracle On Demand. Megan is the Senior Director of ERP Integration Services at CardConnect and has supported and designed solutions across various Oracle modules ranging from human resources, supply chain, to finance teams. She has worked for Dover Corporation, NetApp, and Danaher Corporation. Megan received her Bachelor of Information Systems and Technology degree from Pennsylvania State Universities. Mike and Megan, would you mind giving a brief overview of your organizations?
Thank you, Phil. So I'll start. With regard to Integrigy, we are an organization exclusively focused on the security of databases and how to best secure the information within them. We have two main lines of business. One is services and the other is product. For the services, we assist clients to think through security assessment needs, compliance assistance, as well as other issues with regard to auditing and encryption. Our products are purpose-built for securing databases. AppCentry is a platform for auditors to review and secure databases. The AppDefend product is a purpose-built tool for defending the Oracle E-Business Suite. And much of what we find in the services is repackaged back into the products there. So this is an educational webinar, though, so that's enough about Integrigy. I'll turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Mike. So CardConnect is a payment technology company focused on providing tokenized solutions and utilizing gateway functionality to support credit card processing. We are P2PE certified for our solution application, as well as offering P2PE devices. So we work with clients to ensure that they're not only tokenizing their data, but also reducing their PCI scope in their environments and offering solutions that do so. So some of the technology that we talk about with our clients is utilizing the gateway to make the credit card. We support level 2, level 3 interchange optimization, as well as multi-currency. We have various avenues that we implement our gateway, whether it's SOAP or REST APIs, whether it's Oracle, JD Edwards, and cloud offerings, or SAP itself. We also have CardSecure, which is the vault. So this is kind of our intelligent token area. We also support tokenizing other sensitive data outside of credit cards for customers. In addition, we have acquiring and reporting features as well. So we're able to provide customers with robust reporting avenues, as well as providing automated reconciliation. We have features like Account Updater to ensure that cards are updated when they expire, and the tokens then are returned back to our customers. So, that's probably about it. I can hand this back over, Phil, to you.
All right, thank you. Now, the agenda for the day will focus on 3 areas. First, Mike will speak to PCI requirements and the difficulties they impose on the Oracle E-Business Suite. Next, Mike will speak about issues you should consider when credit card data resides in your EBS. Megan will then follow up with an alternative solution of keeping credit card data out of your EBS and therefore keeping your EBS out from under PCI compliance requirements and issues. I'll now turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Phil. So let's break down PCI DSS with an eye for the Oracle E-Business Suite here. So very simply put, PCI complies to the entire tech stack, and whether or not you have a handful of credit card numbers in there or you have a large number, PCI doesn't treat them any differently. You have to look at the whole, and the whole is with regard to not just the storing but the processing and any manipulation of cardholder data, period. Pretty straightforward. So we break down the 12 major components of PCI DSS on the left there. These are actually the section headings if you're not familiar with the PCI requirement itself. topics such as Section 10 for tracking and monitoring access, and then specifically in around, for example, requirement Section 3 there for the storing and protecting of cardholder data. So what we've done here on this slide here is lay out those 12 major areas or components of PCI, and then we've mapped them to what I'll refer to as the tech stack, or we'll say the birthday cake, multi-layer birthday cake of technology, starting with the network, then thinking about the server or the operating system that is hosting the database, and the e-business suite that is resting on top of the database, which is on top of the server running running to the network there. So what we've highlighted in orange there are what we're really going to be talking about here today. So when you look at PCI, or when you look at the e-business suite and you look at it through the requirements of PCI DSS, what are the requirements, right? What do you need to have in place? So this is what we've done as far as the check marks there. You can see that there are some things that that are policy-based, right? So this means that that's more operational than versus a configuration setting. So we'll, I think, move on to the next layer here as far as the same 12 components there, and then how hard is it? And this is this slide's put together from a number of years of sitting down with clients and helping them think through PCI DSS, not just with the Oracle e-business suite, but certainly other with the database as well as some other platforms. But specifically with regard to what makes things difficult for the Oracle e-business suite here is the really in and around the encryption there, the requirement 3, and you can see that is very much in red, and that is very much in the application layer there, and also with the auditing with requirement 10 there. And you can see that that not only has some difficulties in and around at the application, but also at the database. Just as an aside, we do have up on Integrigy's website, we do have a pretty thorough white paper on this topic that is freely available, and much of the content in this webinar is explained in detail there for those people that want to dig a little deeper. But just some comments. So we've laid out that the e-business suite, there are 12 components of PCI, and when you think about what is difficult to make, what are the difficulties making the PCI, or meeting PCI compliance with regard to the Oracle e-business suite, is that out of the box, first and foremost, the standard install is not PCI compliant. Release 12, which is the latest released, came out a few years ago, actually made it a little easier. It actually superseded the prior functionality, but this functionality is disabled by default. You need to turn it on. And not just that, the one-time setup per se to encrypt the cardholder data is not it. There is ongoing maintenance. There's actually things you need to do literally every day of the year, or need to produce attestation to your auditors that you have policies and procedures for these tasks. For example, outside of the need to encrypt cardholder data, requirements such as commonly we sit down and clients are not thinking about things such as requirement 6 here, as far as the need to apply CPU or security patches, which is in 30 days of release. So for those of you familiar with the Oracle cadence, 4 times a year Oracle, and it was just I think yesterday or the day before that Oracle released the last one for this year. The Oracle CPUs are scheduled 4 per year, once per quarter. Commonly, clients clients running a large Oracle eBusiness Suite implementation find it difficult to apply a CPU within 30 days. Most clients are looking to see whether or not the patches are clean and might attempt to take them within 60, if not 90 days of the release. So staying one CPU behind. Some clients, especially if you're running payroll or if you have a lot of heavy manufacturing going on, the ability to take down the database might push you to only patching this twice a year for CPUs. So requirement 6 there, you can't lose sight of that. Other issues, one more point on requirement 6 there. That's not just the CPU patches for the application, but also for the database itself. So you need to think about the CPU patches at every layer of the tech stack, right? So application, database, operating system. Requirement 8, details again. The idea that PCI mandates that there are no generic accounts. These would be accounts not tied to a single user, so this means no shared accounts. Shared accounts is a very common practice within the Oracle eBusiness Suite. For example, accounts that are built to run concurrent jobs and or potentially for maintenance operations. You need to think through how you're using those. There's even some accounts that come out of the box that are generic that you need to think about securing. But also PCI is talking about some of the requirements, for example, not just the complexity, but sweeping on a regular basis to disable inactive users and change passwords, right? So if you have a large population, you might have, for example, Oracle benefits running, and you could have a good percentage of your user base that might only apply or log on once a year, for example, during open enrollment, right? So PCI gets a little difficulty as to, in this sense, is how to look at it and then what to do. Requirement 10, the need to log and be able to reconstruct on a 12-month rolling basis changes the cardholder data. This is not easy to do, certainly not just in the Oracle eBusiness Suite, but also that this requirement cascades down into the database. And not just that you're collecting the logs, but what are you doing with it? What process do you have in place for the daily log review, right? How can you produce attestation to an auditor to prove that that daily log review is occurring 365 days a year? Some of it can be automated, but at the end of the day, each day a set of eyeballs needs to look at information and make a decision. Requirement 11, the annual penetration test to meet the PCI requirements. If you have cardholder data within the Oracle eBusiness Suite, that test can't just be a test of the network. You need to test the Oracle eBusiness Suite as well, because that is where the cardholder data is being stored. So that's kind of a high-level review of PCI and some of the difficulties for meeting PCI compliance with the Oracle eBusiness Suite. Let's now boil down specifically what pieces of functionality does Oracle give you as standard functionality for PCI compliance. So with release 12, Oracle rewrote in much of the functionality and came out with a new module called the Oracle Payments. So this is a nice consolidation. It actually pulled together a lot of different pieces of information. If you think about it, you have a lot of payment information spread across many modules, from iStore to orders and payments and quoting. Now all of that is brought into one or under one umbrella. And what Oracle did with the secure payment repository is that now, since all this information has been, we'll say, put in one spot, they've allowed that information that you collect, for example, whether it's a bank account or a credit card number, to be optionally masked or encrypted. So just as one point of vocabulary here, you can see on the slide there that, and I just want to mention, external accounts, because really what Oracle did with Release 12 here, with the Oracle Payments module, is that anything that is an external account, Oracle says that any account owned by your customers or your vendors are external to your organization. Things that are internal to your organization would be the checking accounts that that the company uses, as well as the bank accounts, let's say, of your employees for direct deposit, right? So just one point of clarification there between internal and external accounts. One point to that, though, the secure payment repository in the encryption only applies to external accounts. So hopefully this clarifies it a little bit more. What Oracle did with Release 12 is that Oracle consolidated, whereas before you had payment information spread across many modules. This is a logical diagram. It's not actually an entity relationship diagram, though we do have a few tables that we're mentioning there. Draw your attention to the upper left-hand corner there. With Release 12, with the secure payment repository, specifically what Oracle did is that Oracle put all the credit cards into one spot, one table, and that table name is IBY credit card. By default, anything that's put in there is in clear text. You need to actually take the optional steps to encrypt it. That is a three-step process. The first thing you do is you create a wallet. Then you go into the Oracle user interface. You basically give the location of the wallet, and then you run some concurrent jobs to encrypt it. Sounds easy. There's a little bit more to that. Some of the steps that you need to think about are with regard to how many wallets you might have. For example, if most likely you have SSL running. That's all in the white paper. Don't need to get too deep into it today, though. But I do want to mention again there's some things you might not be thinking about. So requirement 643. You cannot put live cardholder data. You cannot let live cardholder data out of production. So a very common practice with the Oracle eBusiness Suite is to clone to create test and development instances for testing and development. You need to have a process in place to sanitize that. The other thing you need to do with regard to producing a clean non-prod environment is you need to protect the keys. So you need to do something with that payment wallet that we just talked about. Definitely some decisions you need to make with regard to whether or not you're going to purge, remove, or scramble. With regard to purging, PCI also has a requirement to keep that cardholder data alive for only a certain amount of time. In other words, when you go to the grocery store or Best Buy and you pay for items with your credit card, they keep that information for about 18 months or so. They don't keep it for years, right? They don't keep it forever. Unfortunately, the Oracle eBusiness Suite doesn't give you any tools for that. There's some enhancement requests, but they really leave you holding the bag per se to think about how to purge that cardholder data. If you're heading out to Oracle Open World next week and you happen to run into Oracle Product Management and you're thinking about cardholder data, this would be certainly something to press them on. So, yes, there is some tools that Oracle gives you. They're off, you need to turn them on. There's some other challenges. Here's just one or two thoughts to leave you with before we turn it over to Megan, in that what do we commonly find with regard to clients running the eBusiness Suite and cardholder data? We find credit card data many different places. Many times, it's not just interfaces, but people are taking snapshots of tables for backups prior to data fixes, and we'll find, for example, credit cards and a table name, for example, IBY security segments, and then a date or something alongside of it. Here's just a short, just a demonstrative slide here, just different places where we've found credit cards, but also just giving you an idea for also, yes, we do find social security numbers and bank accounts in many different places too. Long and the short of this is that PCI DSS is costly and ongoing. It is not just a one-day exercise. There are tasks, there's processes, there's investments that your organization needs to make, and processes need to be in place 24/7, 365 days a year. Not just the cost there, but also there's an impact to the velocity at which you can run your business. Not just the speed at which you can turn around and clone, but also requirements, for example, going back to that patching, you need to apply CPU patches, and that means testing, that means taking down in production and applying those patches. That can affect your bottom line or certainly the downtime for the Oracle Business Suite. PCI applies to the whole environment. Encryption is just one requirement. That said, Megan now is going to talk with you a little bit more about our alternative, that you can still use the Oracle eBusiness Suite to process transactions, but move the responsibility of PCI DSS out from underneath the Oracle eBusiness Suite and, so to speak, stand under another umbrella with that. So with that, Megan, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I'll have you walk us through what it is exactly that CardConnect can do with companies to meet PCI DSS.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So first, let's start. There we go. Start with the decade of PCI. So start with the timeline. So in the last 10 years, there's been continuous evolution on the PCI data security standards. Prior to the first release in 2004, PCI DSS was 5 different programs being driven by the big names in the financial service industry: Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, and JCB. They've all had their own programs, and then the first release of PCI was in 2004 when these big names merged their programs to enforce one standard of security and how the merchants supported storing, processing, and transmission of credit card holder data. Within 2 years, the PCI created a set of requirements for web-facing applications and released the next version of standard, the 1.1. This outlined procedures for security transmission protocols, how code was being developed and deployed, and then how the code was also being replicated between the environments, such as your prod and development environments, like Mike was mentioning earlier. In 2008, 1.2 highlighted network security to ensure protocols and denying traffic from untrusted sites, as well as ensuring that systems were protected with antivirus software. 2.0 came in 2010, where the Council outlined importance on the assessment process and how that process should review the cardholder data. And 3 years later, in November, 3.0 came out. The Council identified this other major release, which outlined the best practices for merchants to follow to ensure that cardholder data was secure and safe in their daily operations. Most recently, in 2015, the Council has identified a list of components which support the P2PE integration solutions. Prior to this P2PE release, it was strictly, PCI Council was strictly noting solutions or applications, not components. With this update of 3.0, this is giving merchants more options to build P2PE architecture that best fit their environment. And so as you can see, things are continuously changing and adhering to the industry, and we're sure that changes will continue as the Council makes sure that credit card security standards are up to par. So in addition to PCI requirements that customers work in Oracle, they also will encounter additional compliance areas that they must adhere to based off their line of business, right? So for organizations or agencies in healthcare, they must make sure their information is complying with HIPAA, as well as for publicly traded companies, they must comply with Sarbanes-Oxley for their financial information and reporting. Government agencies and contractors dealing with the federal information will need to ensure that they're following the Federal Information Security Act. And then so the next thing is, what steps can they take to ensure that they're compliant and creating an additional layer of security? And this is where tokenization comes in. tokenization of the sensitive data is the first step we're seeing customers take. So why tokenize? In organizations using Oracle, we are seeing them tokenize to remove the sensitive data from their EBS system entirely and reduce their PCI scope. It's also reducing the risk if the company were breached. With a token being replaced for the sensitive data, if they were ever breached, the data is of no value and it's not usable elsewhere if it were obtained by a malicious user. What you may be wondering now is that if the tokenization sounds great, but what do I do if I already have credit card data in my system? How do I get there? So there's different avenues to decrypt the sensitive data and complete a one-time tokenization. The sensitive data can be replaced with these tokens and used ongoing. We have seen in our experience R12 customers utilize the out-of-the-box decrypt credit card concurrent program to take their encrypted credit cards and return them to clear cards. What may have been surprising is that that is a out-of-the-box program. If you're not familiar with that, a lot of our customers are not as well, and they don't have knowledge of who has access to it, and running this program doesn't require the user to know the master key of the encryption. They can execute it and return the cards in clear text without knowledge of that key. So what we do find is that that's surprising to our customers, and they definitely they get excited for a tokenized solution and moving to that. Now that's R12, but we have seen a lot of customers on 11i still who have encrypted credit card data and are wondering how they can decrypt it. We've been able to work with them and have seen them themselves been able to decrypt these encrypted cards without knowledge of the keys to return the original card data. Now this is something we only do and support customers in order to get them tokenized, not something that we do maliciously, but obviously if we're able to figure it out, someone intentionally wanting that data could do the same as well. So how do you ensure secure transactions once you've tokenized? The next step would be to tokenize at the earliest point of entry. So this next slide just shows you when you're evaluating your tokenized provider, you want to ensure that the solution is tokenizing at the earliest point of entry. So if you have mobile or tablet devices in addition to terminals, you want to ensure that the tokenized solution you're looking at is able to support and has an offering in those areas of your business and in that platform. For commerce platforms, a good Oracle example that we see is the Commerce Cloud or iStore, where customers are placing the order with the merchant, and then they also want to ensure at that data point that transaction is being secured and tokenized at the point of entry. As well as, let's use a business-to-business transaction where you have a call center agent in an Oracle order form, and they're taking the call over the phone, and they're in order management, or you could have an accounts receivable rep processing a past due invoice and using the customer's credit card to do that payment, or even a corporate card to complete the transaction. The tokenization needs to occur prior to that credit card number being entered into the Oracle form. This is going to ensure that the EBS environment is out of scope. Another risk area is the security of the device. So we mentioned P2PE a little bit earlier, but you can add another layer here that'll bring in the 2015 P2PE compliance item that we talked about earlier. With this P2PE device, the customer can eliminate the workstation from PCI Scope, again, reducing their PCI audit. I'll go through a little bit more details on the P2PE solution here in the next few slides. But what is a token, right? We've covered what token is it, why to tokenize, when to tokenize, but what kind of tokens are there? So when you think about your solution and what best fits your business, you want to make sure that the vendor, you understand what type of token you're receiving from your vendor, and you want to ensure it fits your business the best. So we've noted a few key highlights you want to focus on when you're evaluating your vendor. One is token security, the next is the token intelligence, and then what type of token it is. For token security, how the token is created. Is it random or is it derivative? You want to ensure that this option that you pick best fits your business, like I've mentioned. Random or irreversible tokens are in no way represent the original card value, where a derivative token is something which is encrypted and can be decrypted if the individual has knowledge of the key and are intended to be decrypted for use. The random irreversible, right, is not easily understood. Next is, what is the intelligence behind the token? Does it look like a credit card? Do I know what type of card it is? So there's several different areas here that you can evaluate. LUN testing is used to ensure that the card is a valid card. It's making sure it's 16 digits, valid combination. It's strictly validation of the card number. It's not to prevent malicious attacks, but a lot of tokens will recognize this LUN test. Another area would be if the token can identify the issuer, meaning whether it's Visa or MasterCard. By recognizing the bank identification number, you can identify this within the first 4 to 6 digits, the BIN number, and this is also another area you want to evaluate when looking through token intelligence. Some tokenized solutions also have intelligence to keep the last 4 digits, retain those last 4 digits from the credit card, and this is where we get into the next bullet of high value evaluation for customers. We've mentioned, depending on your business model, you want to make sure that the token meets your needs. So what we've seen is a lot of Oracle customers want a persistent or a multi-use token, and this is where the token aligns one-to-one with the credit card. So when you come in and the first time you use that token, the next time it will be the same. This seems to be very prevalent in our Oracle customer implementations because they'll have reoccurring orders or they have service contracts, and they need to be able to easily recognize that card and use it. Also, like I said, we want to make sure that the token is easily recognizable. So a lot of times we find customers wanting to store those last 4 digits so that they can recognize whether it's the Visa that ends in 125 or not. The other type of token that is in the market is the individual or the single use. This is essentially like a one-time use. Use it one time and throw it away. So every time you come in, whether you're using the same card or a different card, a new token will be generated and assigned. In our experience, we do see this more in the SAP realm, just because of some of the functionality in SAP that is not the same in Oracle. So in SAP, there's a limitation to be able to assign cards to multiple customer records. So we see this more on that side of the house. So the next piece is, how else can you ensure that your environment is compliant? We've talked about why to tokenize, when, and what tokenization is. But what else can you do to ensure that the environment in your solution is compliant? We always recommend that you're utilizing a vendor, evaluating a vendor that has a secure vault hosting services option for the sensitive card data. By utilizing this avenue, this ensures that the solution is utilizing and calling a secure vault where the credit card data would be translated to a token, and this is the location of the sensitive data, which is outside of your customer environment. We've seen customers implement on-premise solutions, but in this case, it's important to note that customers still have to maintain that physical server, even though it's not theirs. It's in their infrastructure, sitting on their rack in their building. So they still have to secure it, maintain it, patch it, back it up. So it's important to note that companies who do the hosted services, I know they have to go through their rigorous audits and have experts on staff to support it. And we know some customers hesitate to move to this hosted solution services because it's viewed outside of control, right? It's no longer a tangible item and you're relying on somebody else. But there are things that you can do to gain insight on that hosted services company's compliance. And also you need to move to a hosted services provider to ensure that your EBS environment is out of PCI scope. So how do you gain insight on the hosted services provider's compliance? It's completely acceptable for you to ask for standard compliance documentation, so asking for their SAQs or the attestation of compliance and their yearly audits. They can provide that to you, and you can use that to validate that they are also PCI certified. So this next slide is to show you a quick example of a customer we've worked with who originally was a SAQD, and they had noted they had several employees working to support their audits, right? They had a compliance manager, network guy, so on the security side, as well as a DBA. And they were working to implement the tokenization solution, and once they did this, they moved from that self-assessment questionnaire B, which is typically is the 76-page audit, to an SAQ A or B, which is 13 pages. To also note, if they move in addition, they could have put a P2PE solution in place, and the solution then would also take their EBS environment out of scope in addition to any of their peripherals. So if they have call centers and they have devices, their infrastructure, those areas in that workstation is what would come out of scope in addition to a P2PE device. And the self-assessment questionnaire that those users and companies would go through would be the SAQ P2PE HW for hardware. And that is a 20-page audit versus the 76-page audit of the SAQD. Okay, so what's next? What's next for PCI? As many of you know, the EMV mandate is coming, and we're all aware we're getting the new cards in the mail, and we're seeing the new devices in the stores. So the EMV is utilizing the chip to store all the card data rather than the magnetic stripe. You will note on the new cards you'll have both, and this is for the chip and the mag stripe for backward compatibility. We covered a little bit of the PE devices as well, but a quick reference that you'll be familiar with is the Home Depot Target hacks, right? These hacks were based off the memory, off that mag stripe, and the time in which the card was swiped on the device, and the hack was happening on the memory level so that before the data hit the server, it was being pulled out of memory on the machine. So with a P2PE device, the data would be encrypted at the time of swipe, and the value in memory would be the token and not the actual cardholder data. And this would be if there was a hack in the memory, then if it's encrypted and it's tokenized, it's not able to be of any value. So that's the P2PE device. So what else is to come? Many of you are probably very familiar with 3D Secure, but you know it as certified by Visa. This is to support online transactions. You may see this on different sites if you're Amazon, depending on what you're purchasing and where you're purchasing it at. And this is to create authentication between the merchant and the bank who issued the card, and the middle domain, right, the domain between the merchant and the bank issuer. And this is where they ensure the authentication of who's making the purchase. Okay, so with that, if you have any questions, put them in the chat window. Otherwise, Phil, I'll turn it back over to you for recap.
Thank you, Megan. To summarize what we've just heard, in Section 1, Mike Miller started off the session speaking about how Oracle EBS Suite does not meet the requirements set by PCI. He mapped out the 12 PCI requirements and showed where Oracle EBS and database fell short. In the second session, Mike then followed up with some of the issues you must consider if you're using or plan to use credit card data in your EBS, including the finding and purging of existing credit card and other sensitive data. In the last session, Megan concluded by speaking about the last decade of PCI and about taking the Oracle EBS out of the PCI compliance picture through the use of tokenization and encryption. She spoke about how tokenization works and some of the cost benefits you might expect. Both Mike's and Megan's contact information will be displayed in a moment here. But now let's get to the questions. And we have a couple. The first one. How long is the typical integration process for tokenization? Megan, it sounds like you.
Yeah, so we've seen integrations for tokenization take anywhere from several weeks to several months. It really depends on the amount of historic data and as well as kind of the complexity of the business, the different avenues in which they accept payment, their peripherals as well as just within Oracle itself. So it can vary from, I would say, 45 days to 6 months. It really just depends on business and past historic data.
Thank you. Next question. Corporate credit cards, do they need to be PCI compliant?
I'll take that, Phil. So the short answer is no, or rarely have we, or if ever, have we seen that. So the best way to answer that is to read the fine print of your cardholder agreement, be that with Visa or MasterCard, and in that fine print for your corporate cards, there is probably a strong recommendation to secure them, but falling short of needing to meet PCI DSS. If that's not clear in the cardholder agreement, then I would certainly talk to the issuer of the card. Well, I have the floor here. Just I'll make another plug just to follow up on a comment that Megan was making with regard to the concurrent program within the Oracle EBS standard solution there to decrypt the credit cards. That is fully documented in one of our white papers up on Integrigy's website as to what it is, how it works, and what to do as far as disabling it and monitoring to make sure that it doesn't get re-enabled. So for those people that are concerned about that, certainly it's up on a white paper, and if there's any questions, please reach out to me. Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. Next question. Can tokenization cause any performance problems with Oracle EBS?
Yeah, I can answer that. We in our integrations and the efforts we've done, we have not seen that it creates any performance issue. The system treats the token just as it would a standard credit card and allows it to move through the gateway and the information just as it would a regular credit card.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, this sounds one like for you. Does Oracle credit card encryption cause any performance problems?
Quick answer, no. Certainly the volume of which you are pushing transactions through, but assuming a Oracle iStore would not be something that I would see on a day-over-day. I'll caveat that two different ways. We're not talking about a bulk mass encryption. Let's say that day one where you're encrypting a couple of years worth of historical transactions, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about as transactions are created on your website.
All right, thank you. Next question. What types of payment acceptance hardware/software can be used with tokenization?
Yeah, so I can answer that. We have several different devices, all depending on the platform. We have different Ingenico devices that support both the EMV as well as the swipe, as well as peripheral would be web stores, e-commerce sites that the tokenization is applicable and can be utilized.
All right, and then the last question we have here, and I'll read it. I'm not quite sure I understand it. Do you have any cheat sheets on validating e-business suite is within compliance of PCI DSS 3.0, specifically technical?
Well, I can make a pass at that. The white paper I was mentioning earlier, the white paper that goes through, I think, documenting the risk of the decrypting, the concurrent program that decrypt credit card numbers, actually lays out PCI DSS, the optional functionality to enable it. That's the first part of the white paper. The second part of the white paper is a large appendix that has a multi-page word table that walks through each relevant PCI DSS control down at a control number layer and what needs to be done within the Oracle eBusiness Suite environment to meet that, right? So as far as a checklist, certainly that would get you started.
All right, that's the end of the questions, and I think the end of our session. I'd like to thank Mike Miller from Integrigy and Megan Kelly from CardConnect for a very informative webinar this afternoon. And everybody have a great rest of the week. Take care.